Very good. Yeah, so nice to see everybody here today for a bit of meditation. And so I actually think most people here have done meditation before several times. So kind of like an experienced experience retreat. People have experience here. And so, we come to meditation, everybody comes to meditation for a purpose. We all have a kind of purpose in coming here to meditate. And that is kind of the same for everybody, regardless of their religion, regardless of their background. And that's basically that everybody's looking for a way to be happy. Everybody is looking for a way to kind of avoid unhappiness, avoid kind of displeasure, avoid kind of unpleasant feelings. And so the interesting thing about the way that these kind of happiness and unhappiness arises in the mind is that happiness and unhappiness arise in the mind largely based on what we do. It's kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of, remember growing up, we kind of think happiness and unhappiness arise in a person's mind based on what they get. It's kind of, we get, kind of, remember being very happy, you get some kind of like award, whatever it might be, you get something kind of that looks nice, whatever that might be, and then, a certain amount of kind of happiness arises, a certain amount of pleasant feeling that comes from that. And so I think if I could just get, what I need, then I would be happy, then I would be finally at ease. But it's kind of this ever receding goal, kind of like with this donkey with the carrot. Kind of lasts for a little while, whatever a person tends to get, and then after a while the satisfaction they get from that fades. So kind of thinking the other day, imagine you kind of won some award in elementary school, you did well on a test, kind of that award or whatever is now no longer as meaningful. Kind of, whatever one had back then no longer has the same power to satisfy a person that it did previously. And this is the kind of ever receding goal of craving. Kind of craving leads a person on in this way, leads a person on to seek this, leads a person on to seek that. So it's kind of interesting the way that the mind works in this way, because I think everybody is, here is, heard all this before, heard about the way craving operates before, knows about the Buddhist teachings on this, but the way that it actually works in the mind is something that's really different. It's kind of something that a person has to practice with, rather than just kind of knowing. So oftentimes, we've been talking recently in a lot of the meditation classes about some of these kind of like more mysterious aspects of kamma, some of the more mysterious ways that things come together, the way things fall apart. And the way that a person's sense of what they own, of what they are, of what makes them safe is usually based on what they think they can see about the future, what they think they can know about the future, what they think they'll be in the future, what they think they'll have in the future. And so long as the kind of projection from this moment seems good in the future seems good. People are happy. So long as a projection from this moment seems bad in the future, things seem bad in the future. This all tends to be based on what a person knows, what they can see right now, what they're able to perceive right now, what they're able to project right now. But the way that craving actually works in the mind for a person who comes to practice meditation is far more kind of insidious, kind of far more agile. Kind of this word kind of has this kind of agility, this ability to move around, kind of far more kind of difficult to pin down, difficult to see, difficult to trace. And it's for this reason that although a person may know a lot about the Buddhist teachings, the kind of practice of the Buddhist teachings is something different. It's something that's apart. It's like somebody who knows the kind of chemical composition of a mango, or kind of, okay, we want to learn about mangoes, kind of see what's going on with mangoes. So you're going to learn where the mango is grown. Mangoes grow here, this is how you grow it. You plant the seed in this way, you water it in this way. And a person can become really expert in this kind of knowledge. Know about what a mango is. You can even learn the colors of the different mangoes, the textures, without touching them. You kind of learn it from a book. But then that doesn't really allay a person's hunger. And actually what a person tends to learn is what they knew, what they saw, what they read in the books, and what they practice tends to be something that's not exactly the way they thought, not exactly the way they planned, not exactly what they were looking for, not exactly what they expected to see. And this is exactly how it is for a person who comes to practice meditation, whether a person's been practicing for a short time, whether they've been practicing for a long time. What we read in the books is one thing, and it's kind of true. You know, what the Buddha said is true. But our ideas about it, our projections about it into the future, our beliefs about what it'll be now, what it'll be in the future, sometimes turn out to be very different than what we thought. And this is precisely what makes craving, what makes suffering, what makes happiness difficult to see, difficult to trace, difficult to track. And so sometimes people want to know kind of what's the, you can imagine some people kind of been to maybe a few meditation courses, what's the more advanced teaching? And one of the interesting things about kind of the way that the teachers teach, kind of when you go to train with them full time, is they emphasize quite a bit this aspect of putting forth effort. It's kind of not in terms of, putting forth effort like, going to lift like 1,000-pound weight right now, but in terms of this kind of diligence, in terms of this kind of heedfulness, because this is one of the things we learn when we go to actually try to plant the mango seed ourselves, when we try to water it ourselves, when we try to make it grow ourselves. The instructions in the book said this, but wait a minute, I'm watering it, and it's not growing the way I thought. What did I miss? What is it that I'm not seeing? What is it that I didn't predict? How do I stop it? And this is the more advanced teachings on meditation. Whenever a person's mind wanders out, whatever it wanders out to, if a person learns to restrain it, if they learn to bring it back, if they learn to resist whatever it is that made their mind reach out, this is where they learn a lot about what the Buddha taught, about what he really taught, about what he really meant, about where his teachings really lead to. Because the things that cause a person to suffer, the things that cause a person to be happy, they're present in the mind all the time. Which is why the training of the mind reaches far, far beyond just the knowledge of a technique. It reaches beyond the knowledge of a technique to the actual elimination of desire, the actual elimination of suffering that occurs in the mind here and now. Now, the way that a person does this is, again, just through this kind of heedfulness. Somebody sent me a quote on the internet the other day. It was actually by a monk I really revere. And as a monk, you can't always perfectly memorize every single sutta, and you get the gist of what he's trying to say. Actually, I, very often can't remember the suttas I'm trying to quote. But in any event, the sutta, what the monk said was, mindfulness is the foremost quality. That's what the Buddha said was foremost. But then I asked this I was like, wait a minute, actually what he said was heedfulness is the foremost quality. It's kind of heedfulness is the elephant's footprint. All the other skillful qualities fit into this quality of heedfulness. And heedfulness basically means being really careful about what a person does, being really careful about how a person acts, being really careful about how a person directs their mind, trying to direct it towards increasingly skillful qualities, increasingly better qualities. So actually, kind of was an interesting question the other day. If a person's been meditating for a long time, what is it that stops a person from progressing forward? All we need to do in that case is ask ourselves, what wholesome quality am I not, maybe not all, what wholesome quality do I not have that I want to get? What unwholesome quality do I have right now that I want to get rid of? And it's here that we start to see the more advanced teachings on Buddhism. Because the interesting thing about the very things that are difficult to eliminate, difficult to let go of, that we know are causing us to suffer, those things are linked, tend to very often be linked to things that a person loves. It's kind of very interesting. This is the way that craving operates. This is why it's so insidious. The things that a person loves are the very things that cause them to suffer. This kind of textbook knowledge a person knows about, right? But it's a very different thing when a person goes to actually practice that themselves, when a person goes to actually train their mind in this themselves. And this is where the practice and training of Buddhism becomes tricky, becomes difficult, where the mind becomes hard to pin down, hard to alight on, and why it goes so much further than a technique, why it goes so much further than book knowledge. Because when a person actually tries to grow a mango, when they actually plant the seeds, when they actually see it grow, the taste of a mango and the book knowledge of its chemical composition are two different things. Two totally different things. That's why it's very interesting, whenever in Buddhist history you see when the pendulum swings too far towards meditation and falls away from scholarship, people develop wrong views. When the pendulum, at least my understanding from what I've seen in my life, when the pendulum swings too far towards scholarship and people stop practicing meditation, people develop wrong views. And I think the other day we were talking a bit about the historical developments of Buddhist thought and how in kind of, the centuries after the Buddha, the monks started to speculate on all kinds of, things that the Buddha didn't teach about. Started to speculate on the nature of the world, the nature of the cosmos, the nature of kind of, all these various things, and came up with ideas about what ultimate reality was. Kind of equated that with Nibbana. And as a result of that, kind of eventually, Hinduism and Buddhism started to fight, and Hinduism was able to overthrow Buddhism in India, largely because Buddhist philosophy had developed in all these directions that the Buddha didn't teach about. That was the kind of a lever that this very intelligent Hindu monk named Adi Shankara was able to use to leverage Buddhism. And in the same way, when people lose the Buddhist teachings entirely, then what tends to happen is they develop ideas about kind of like a technique that they should do. Usually, often in the West at this time, it's just, watching, just this being aware. So long as somebody is aware, this thing that's aware, that's safe. If we just watch whatever comes into our mind until it falls away, then what remains after that, that's our true mind. That's our true self. And that gets equated with Nibbana. But if we know what the Buddha taught in his teachings in the suttas, that's actually just Vijnana Khanda. It's kind of, just our consciousness. It's nothing to grab onto. So, although, knowing about how to grow a mango, from the books, knowing its chemical composition might not be the same thing as biting into it, it's still important to know. It's still good to know. But all of this has as its end result, all of this has as its end goal, actually trying to alleviate our hunger, actually trying to reduce our hunger. So, sometimes, for example, the way that the mind is tricky to pin down. Remember seeing, if you look at photos, of yourself, or a person looks at photos of themselves when they're young and they think, how am I going to look when I'm old? You can't project, hard to project a person's mind to when they're like 80, 90, kind of, my face will be different, everything will fall away, but you can't, it's hard to imagine. I remember going to this kind of computer program and, they would project, what you'd look like at the science center. They project what you look like when you're 70 or something like that. But, it's, kind of doesn't, looks kind of interesting, but it's not 100% accurate. But then if you look at a person's picture when they were, say, 20, and then you look at a person's picture when they were 60, you can't even recognize that person sometimes. Kind of their body, their face changes so much. And this is precisely where this craving is insidious. Because when a person is 20, they can't imagine what they'll look like when they're 60. They can't imagine their beauty falling away. They can't imagine their health falling away. They can't imagine all these various things fall away. And this is what makes those things seem safe. This is what makes those things seem good to grab onto. And this is kind of similar to the way a person might have like a snake. So, you get a snake, it's got the head, and then it's got the tail, right? And kind of the tail of the snake seems really great. So a person goes to grab onto it, and the head turns around and bites them. So it's for this reason that the Buddha teaches us to turn our minds back, not so much onto these external things that people love, that people crave for, but to turn our minds back towards trying to eliminate this kind of very craving, to try to eliminate this very desire that leads a person onwards, 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 always seeking ever fresh delight. And this is something that's tricky to do. This is something that's not easy to do. It's like planting a mango seed, watering it, protecting it, and watching it grow. But so long as a person does this, so long as a person waters their seed well, so long as a person watches it grow, so long as a person waits till it ripens, then the day comes when they're able to taste the fruit of that mango themselves, when they're able to bite into that mango themselves, when they're able to know what the Buddha taught for themselves. And this is a kind of taste that a person never forgets. A person never needs to forget. So this is why I said the taste of the Dhamma, the taste of the Buddha's teachings, for I remember this quote, I'm not 100% good at these things, surpasses all other tastes. Kind of the flavor of the Dhamma surpasses all other flavors. And so I can remember, being young, especially, thinking about all these various things, what it's going to be like, when, when you're 20, what it's going to be like when you're 30, what it's going to be like when you're 40. And you have this kind of imagination of what these kind of things will be like, projecting kind of into the future. But the thing that's very difficult to project into, the thing that's very difficult to imagine, is projecting what it'll be like to taste the Dhamma. Projecting what it'll be like to experience the Dhamma. Because the Dhamma is something that until a person experiences it, is something that has never been experienced before. So it's for this reason that people come to meditate in all the various traditions. It's for this reason that people do these various things. It's to try to find this happiness that kind of goes beyond the usual types of happiness that a person has had before. To try to find these kind of experiences that go beyond the usual type of experiences that a person has had before. And these kind of things surpass the usual kinds. It's kind of like to use this kind of analogy. Some of my friends kind of like, they're like addicted to marijuana, or like addicted to whatever. And they can't go anywhere without marijuana. You can't travel to like Thailand, couldn't travel to Asia, because a lot of places it's like you'll get the death penalty if you have marijuana there. And without marijuana, they just can't imagine a life without that, without their kind of marijuana. But if you take somebody who's never smoked marijuana and you point that person out, it's like, hey, would you want to be like this guy? Would you want to have the same addiction? They'd be like, no, I don't want this same addiction. I don't want to be like this fellow. I don't want to have that. And in the same way, this is how it is when a person gradually eliminates their attachments, gradually eliminates their unwholesome habits. When a person eliminates these things, when they taste the flavor of these things, they don't want to go back to having the same things again. They don't tend to want to have them again. And it's in this way that craving fades away. So the path of the Buddha's teachings, the path of the Dhamma, is not some completely, dry, painful, terrible path. Actually, the potentials for happiness, the potentials for what people are looking for, are always there, kind of always existing all the time. It's just that a person's mind is kind of blinded to them. And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha says that bhikkhus, the mind is radiant. It's defiled, it's covered by defilements that come in. It's kind of like you have a kind of moon, or you have the sun, and kind of on a very cloudy day you can't see anything at all. It's kind of just totally, you can see, you can't see the sun at all basically. You can see some light. But you don't have an idea of what that kind of light would be like until the clouds disperse, until the clouds go away from the sun. And in the same way, until a person starts to plane away their bad habits, starts to get rid of their unwholesome tendencies of mind, starts to rein their mind in, they don't have an idea of the happiness that's possible in the mind. So I remember when I was kind of a young man, just started to get into Buddhism, and I was I was in grade 11, the summer going into grade 12. And I spent a lot of time in high school kind of, partying and kind of like goofing off. And then towards the end of grade 11, I realized, wait a minute, I better, get my act together. I'm going to need to go to university. But the thing was that it actually stopped taking math in like grade 10. I'd never been a really big math person. But, to basically do any type of career, you kind of need math these days. So I went to a guidance counselor and tried to figure out, what kind of things do I need to go to university. And at the top of the list was math. You have to, you're going to need to get your math. So I went to the, by the way, that year was the year that after my year, there was what they called the double cohort. So, Mike, our prime minister, or our premier, had eliminated grade 13 in the year after mine. So that meant that twice as many people were going to graduate the year after me. So I couldn't take an extra year in high school. I had to make sure that I was, graduating high school at that time with my grade, or I was going to be competing against double the number of people. But as it turned out, I had that summer, I was in grade 11, or grade 12 actually, that was the summer of grade 12, going into grade 13. And to get into the program, to get into the business program I wanted, you needed a grade 13 math. But I basically dropped math in grade 10, so I didn't have I didn't have a grade 11 math, I didn't have a grade 12 math, but I needed this kind of OAC math. So I went to the kind of guidance counselor, and she said, okay, plotted a course. It turned out there was one OAC math for which you didn't need grade 12 math, just one. And it was the summer, so I couldn't take grade 11 math. I had to take it through what's called correspondence. So I went to this kind of correspondence department in the high school, and I said, I'd like to kind of get the correspondence course for grade 11 math. And the person who was giving away the kind of courses, he's like, yeah, I've never seen anybody really do well in these courses. I was like, okay, that kind of puts a damper on it. You could have just given me the booklet. But in any event, I took that booklet, and at that time, it just started to kind of get into meditation. So kind of a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, kind of in this kind of doing this course. But notice that whenever I meditated, I was able to kind of sit for longer periods of time, able to focus for longer periods of time. So I'd take these kind of study breaks, and meditate in between the breaks, and found that was able to sit for longer. So I still remember there was this one day, amidst all this stress, when I was starting to meditate, trying to give up doing some of the partying, that I was walking from this kind of tutoring office. I got this tutor and was walking from there. It was kind of a nice day like this, and realized that at that time I was kind of thinking, this is the happiest that I've ever been. Just kind of walking, down the road, even in the midst of all this stress, even in the midst of all this pressure, And so this is the kind of benefit that can come from practicing the Dhamma, even in the midst of a lot of stress, even in the midst of a lot of pressure, a person can be happy. And it comes because happiness and unhappiness are all here, all right here at the mind. So depending on how a person directs their mind, they can be happy, they can be unhappy. Those kind of potentials always exist. So the interesting thing was, just to continue that story, by the way, I kind of actually finished that course. I got a 90 in it, so I was kind of in your face, And then, throughout that whole next year, it was kind of an interesting year. There was this, maybe I'll go ahead and tell the story. It's kind of this interesting story, actually. So I was kind of, really into the whole partying mode. And then there was this one guy who came to my school. My group of friends at that time was, they were kind of like a popular group in the school, kind of really good at partying. But there was this, one guy who came, and he and his friends wanted to become, the top group. So one day in OAC, in my last year of high school, this guy and his friends, they came to school, and they were wearing all these black gloves. And they were always threatening to kill my group of friends and me. And so they actually came into the school and they beat up everybody in my group of friends. But amazingly, I was studying in the library, so I didn't get beat up. I avoided that. And then I went to take this kind of grade 12 math, and OAC math, and when I went into this kind of OAC math course, the high school teacher, I was like, can you take this math course without grade 11 math? And he's like, no, that must have been a mistake. And I was like, well, it's right here. It says you don't need grade 12 math as a prerequisite. And he's like, I don't know, good luck. But anyways, I enrolled in that course anyway, and kept going for it, and went to all the extra help sessions. And throughout that last year of high school, whenever I saw this one fellow in the halls. He was always kind of threatening to shoot me and and various things. So it was kind of a lot of stress, and then also kind of giving up the whole partying lifestyle and trying to go towards a lifestyle that was not partying. Then it was kind of lost all of most of my associations, and a lot of the kind of friendships that you have. Not like we stopped being friends, but people come together for a purpose. And so without that purpose, they stop coming together. But through all of that, so long as a person has kind of the Dhamma, so long as they have the Buddhist teachings, then they have a kind of raft to hold on to, no matter how kind of turbulent the external waters get. And so long as they have this kind of heedfulness, then they have the ability to paddle themselves across even really turbulent rivers. And this is the mysterious thing about the way that the Buddhist teachings unfold, about the way that our practice unfolds. You can read in a book, okay, give up craving. Giving up craving is good. Give up bad qualities. Giving up bad qualities is good. Cultivate good qualities. Cultivating good qualities is good. But the things that are unpredictable is that, okay, I want to cultivate good qualities. Well, you have a year left and you have to have OAC math. The things that are unpredictable about cultivating good qualities is trying to cultivate them and somebody telling you, nobody can do this. The things that are unpredictable about trying to abandon bad qualities are trying to abandon them, and all of a sudden, somebody shows up at the school and beats up all of your friends. And you have this kind of pride, wait a minute, I'm not the kind of person whose friends get beat up. I should go, fight back, but, the Buddha doesn't teach to do that. It's the kind of unpredictable thing about abandoning unwholesome qualities. The ways in which a person actually has to abandon them are things that a person can predict. But so long as a person moves forward with this, then they find happinesses that they didn't know existed before, that they couldn't have predicted were there. Things unfold for those people in ways that they didn't imagine, couldn't project, taking from the past and pushing it into the future. And by the way, after that teacher said that, who finishes this? That math course was really hard, but managed to finish that math course. I think I got an 84 in that one, so that was all right for me. But ended up being able to go to university at that time. I actually remember being just terribly worried about being able to get in. But actually, just telling this story for the purpose of the Dhamma, but actually ended up getting in with a scholarship at that university. So this is the kind of interesting thing about the way that things unfold that people couldn't predict. When people set out to try to find a happiness that exists within their mind, it's possible for things to open up for them in ways that they didn't know. But all of this is what makes the taste of the Buddhist teachings and the reading about the Buddhist teachings something different. And the way that the Buddha said it is true. That's completely accurate. Kind of abandon unwholesome things through heedfulness. That's accurate. But what comes up for each person in actually trying to abandon them is different. When the Buddha says cultivate wholesome qualities, it's possible to cultivate wholesome qualities. This leads to happiness. That's accurate. But the things that come up for each person when they're trying to cultivate wholesome qualities are different. And this is why the taste of the kind of mango is a very different thing than the reading about it. And it's much, much more satisfying. Satisfying in ways that people couldn't predict. So the thing that ties all of this together, the thing that makes people run on after all these various things is just this very craving. Giving up partying is difficult because partying is something that people love. Or at least I liked it. Avoiding getting into altercations with people who come to your school is difficult because it's attached to things that people love. I'm going to attach to pride. This is kind of who I am. This is what I deserve. I don't deserve to be treated this way. But because all of this is unpredictable, it requires this element of bravery. It requires this element of effort, which is why when you go to learn the more advanced teachings, I guess you call advanced, kind of they're right there, it's not like it's a hidden secret. When you go to practice in kind of forest monasteries or places like this, then what the ajahns, the people who've attained the path, the people who've practiced successfully, what they constantly emphasize is effort. What they constantly emphasize is this quality of not giving up, this quality of persevering, this quality of being heedful. Because it's this quality of heedfulness that's like the person pedaling the raft across. It's this quality of perseverance is like the person holding on to the raft even when things get turbulent. Yeah? And it's because this raft is for a purpose. The Buddha's teachings are for a purpose, and that purpose is to move us from the things that make us unhappy to the things that make us happy. To move us from the things that are difficult to the things that are unpleasant to the things that are pleasant. To move us from suffering away from suffering. To try to find the end of suffering. So the interesting thing about the Buddhist teachings is that they always build on themselves. Kind of all our practices build on what we practiced before. I think kind of the other day was talking a little bit about this kind of like a bank account metaphor. So, I remember kind of again, being in school, you learn a lot about kind of like interest. If you, banking and interest, if you go take business, you learn about the kind of power of compound interest. Especially, by the way, when you go through and do the kind of mortgage calculations, and you see how much money people you end up paying on a mortgage. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of hundreds of thousands of dollars, when you have this kind of compound interest. But if a person invests their money well, if they put their money in the bank, then that money kind of bears interest on the interest and grows. And in the same way, when a person goes to practice the Buddha's teachings, it starts off in this way with things that seem difficult and seem to bring very little benefit. Okay, some benefit, but not like a huge, overwhelming benefit at first. So you go to study for your kind of grade 11 correspondence course, and you're kind of studying away. Okay, I got the correspondence course. That's okay. But then there's a whole nother thing. Okay, you go to study for your grade 12 math over and over and over again. Okay, I got the grade 12 math. That's okay. But all of this, both in the world and in the Dhamma, these things are like compound interest. Because if a person goes through university, if a person gets a job, that's when this interest starts to compound on itself. When a person studies hard, then eventually they can earn a lot of money. People can earn like $100,000 a year or whatever it is. And with that $100,000, that effort that they put into their grade 11 course, they can buy a house. On the basis of that effort. They can buy a car on the basis of that effort. They can raise children. They can afford, to put their children through university, to pay for their food on the basis of this effort that seems so small, on the basis of this effort that didn't seem all that significant, that seemed like this rough slog or whatever it is. And in the same way, a person's progress in the Dhamma is similar. At first, there's some benefit. You kind of see, okay, wait a minute. I'm happier walking down this street from this kind of grade 11's correspondence course or whatever than I ever was before. It's kind of very happy feeling. But actually, all of this compounds. It's kind of just the beginning of Dhamma practice, to be honest. This is how the ajahns teach. It's kind of just the beginning of what's possible in practicing the Dhamma. The beginning of what's possible in practicing meditation. Because the happiness that comes when a person has let go of a little bit of stress is a little bit. It's still good, still much better than what a person had before. But if a person continues to invest, then that investment grows. Their efforts build on each other. Their efforts compound. So long as they hang on to the raft. So long as they don't give up in trying to paddle across the river. So this is the true benefit of the Dhamma. For a person who continues to practice it, they experience ease. They can be at ease amidst gain. They can be at ease amidst loss. They can be at ease amidst a pile of garbage, walking through a kind of garbage dump. They can be at ease, walking through a beautiful garden. The ease that they have belongs to them, more or less. It belongs to their actions. It comes from their actions. It springs from their heedfulness. So I remember one time I was, I broke, I kind of tell a lot of stories about my adolescence this time here. This is actually live on the internet, but people know what my childhood was like. That's okay. But in any event, one time when I was a young man, I used to like to climb these kind of trees. I kind of had this hobby where I would like climb up trees, and then I would like tie a rope to the tree, and I'd tie a stick to the end of the rope, and then I'd go run. Usually this would be a tree that was near like a big hill or like a kind of mini cliff, and then I'd grab onto the stick and I'd run, and then the rope would kind of swing you around the tree. Kind of do all this kind of thing. You kind of go, get this big arc going. So that was like a lot of fun. And we would do that, for fun and go tying ropes around various trees. Unfortunately, I continued to, tie these kind of ropes around various trees in various places, despite the fact that it was kind of maybe not the best idea. And one time, I remember taking this kind of big run, on this very steep hill. And all I remember is running, and then next thing you know, I was on the ground, very far down. And actually at that time I broke both of my wrists at the same time. So that was a kind of a different story. You can kind of tell all these various stories. I actually had a kind of compound fracture. So that means anyway, maybe I shouldn't go into too much detail about the actual way that it all went down. But enough to say that I was in a lot of pain, kind of was like 16 and broke both my wrists. And remember, they put me in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks because my fracture developed various complications. And so when you're in the hospital with these really bad complications, then they give you these really strong drugs. Kind of like first they give you Tylenol 3. And it's like this drug, and okay, Tylenol 3, I feel less pain. But if you really get injured, they give you like various things like morphine, and like they have this thing called Demerol and Gravol. That actually, anyways, not to but when I was young, that became like my favorite drug in the hospital. I was kind of addicted to, 16, I became like addicted. Not like I didn't go out and get it on the street, but as long as I was in the hospital and they gave it to me, I was pretty happy. And all this pain, I can't move, and you can't move your wrists, and, people have to feed you. But whenever I got that Demerol and Gravol, everything was fine. I remember kind of, getting this injection of Demerol and Gravol, and, just being there with my wrist broken, and the TV wasn't on, and it was just this blank TV, and I was just looking at the TV, and I was like, oh, this is great. It's a blank TV, but I was kind of like high on this, Demerol and Gravol. And so this is the reason why people become addicted to sensual pleasures, become addicted to these various external things, because there's a time period when a person has them that everything seems great. So long as a person gets this external thing, you can be with 2 broken wrists and, looking at a blank TV screen, and the whole world seems really wonderful. Oh, this is great. I've got the Demerol and Gravol. But the way those things work is they tend to diminish. So if I had left the hospital and continued to take Demerol and Gravol, or continued to take morphine, then eventually it wouldn't be as satisfying. I would not be able to stare at a blank TV. In fact, I would need more and more morphine to make myself satisfied. And it would no longer be like walking through a garden is great, walking through, a pile of garbage is great, whatever is great, so long as I've got my Demerol and Gravol. It would diminish. And I would need more and more to keep me happy until the things external to me actually started to suffer because of that. This is the way external things work in the world. This is the way their consumption works in the world. So long as a person consumes them, they become less and less satisfying. They tend to recede. But the way that the Dhamma works is opposite. It doesn't work this way where a person consumes it. The more a person consumes it, it becomes less satisfying. Actually, it's not like being a consumer, it's more like being a producer. So when a person first starts to produce in the Dhamma, it's a little output, For a lot of effort gives a little output. But when they produce more and more, it's kind of grasp the opposite way of the world, then it compounds on itself. So that a person who has the Dhamma, a person who practices the Dhamma, a person who experiences the happiness that comes from their own mind, experiences feelings that exceed the feeling of Demerol and gravel. A person is high on Demerol and gravel, can't imagine anything that's better. Demerol and gravel is the best thing you can possibly have. But the feelings that come from a person who cultivates their mind exceed the feeling that comes from Demerol and gravel. Kind of better than any type of drug, better than any other type of feeling. These are the feelings that come from a person who achieves the jhanas, from a person who achieves calm in their mind. They exceed. And it's for this reason that the Buddha says, on the occasion when he achieves the jhanas, his walking up and down is divine. His sitting is divine. His lying down is divine. In other words, whatever a person does when they have this type of happiness in their mind is something that's amazing. It's like staring at a blank TV screen, with two broken wrists. If a person achieves the jhanas, then they will feel at ease. Staring at a blank TV screen with two broken wrists. Even more at ease than if that person had Demerol and gravel. Such is the power of the mind. It tends to exceed. And it's for this reason that people who turn to invest their mind, who turn to invest their practice in the Dhamma, what they gain from that is much, much greater than what they could gain from anything else they might do. This is why the Buddha puts the Dhamma as foremost, why he says Nibbana is declared to be the highest by all the Buddhas. And this is why, and it's interesting, there was a sutta with Venerable Anuruddha. And the Buddha, he's thinking these thoughts of a great man, and the Buddha knows what's in his mind. And he disappears from Vulture's Peak and reappears where Venerable Anuruddha is. And he says, "It's good, Anuruddha, that you thought these thoughts of a great man." And he goes over and he gives an eighth thought. I kind of won't go over those thoughts of the great man right now. But he says at the end, he says, "Anuruddha, you should, when you think these 8 thoughts of the great man and you cultivate the 4 jhanas, then your meal of alms food," basically, when you go on alms round, by the way, as a monk in Asia or wherever, people try to give you good food, but it's not, it's not the same as like if people are cooking food at like a dana. It tends to be like these, like rice, like a lot of rice, like balls of rice. And then nowadays you get like a lot of candies because, they get like, these like loon moons or like a Twinkie, because those are in packages. And then sometimes they'll take like a curry, which has like it's like curry with water, and they'll put that in your bowl. But it's, it's nothing like a normal meal. It's kind of, sometimes, it's less nutrition, to be sure. You can get by on it, but it's not like a big, it's nothing like a normal dana or like a normal meal. It's if you're getting by, What the Buddha says is, when you cultivate these 4 jhanas and think these 8 thoughts of a great man, your meal of alms food to you will seem like a householder or householder's son's dish of, well-proportioned curry with various sauces, various spices. He says, when you think these 8 thoughts of a great man, then you're dwelling at the root of a tree. By the way, monks, traditionally dwell at the root of a tree. That's what you get instructed is your, that's, when you become a monk, the Buddha gives these instructions. Okay, this is what you can expect from your life as a monk. You can expect alms food. You can expect dwelling at a root of a tree. And by the way, for anybody who's ever dwelled at the root of a tree, it's not like, what you can probably imagine, okay, dwelling at the root of a tree is okay, whatever it is. But there's a lot of things that go into dwelling at the root of a tree that you wouldn't expect. One of them is that when it rains, you get wet. You're there at the root of a tree. You have to kind of scope it out. Where's the high ground here? Otherwise, you end up kind of sitting in a puddle in the middle of the rain. And then all your robes get wet, and you don't have a dryer. So you're wet until it gets sunny out, and then you have to sun your robe. So if it's the rainy season, or if it's kind of a very wet, in Asia sometimes it's not like here. When it pours rain, it really, it's a different level of rain than it is here. You're getting soaked. You could take a bath in the rain there. And so, you get soaked, and you're exposed to the wind, and then sometimes animals come by and you can see them. Maybe a person can see them at their kind of tree. And yet the Buddha says, not to make it sound terrible, it's conducive to meditation. But what the Buddha says is when you dwell at the root of the tree, when you achieve these 4 jhanas and think the 8 thoughts of a great man, your dwelling at the root of a tree will seem to you like a householder's kind of like palace, a kind of mansion. He says to you, when you dwell at the root of the tree, your robe of rags. By the way, kind of monks' rag robes, again, just to let people know about what rag robes are like. They would take the rag robes from like a corpse, like oftentimes it would be like, in Asia they would have these kind of charnel grounds. They're getting more rare now, but they would wrap the body in this funeral shroud. And, it's all most experienced people here, so can tell a bit more of the the way that it works. But the bodies, things come out of those bodies, and onto the shroud. So, they're kind of stained. These kind of robes, the funeral shrouds are stained, and they're smelly. And that smell, like the smell that comes from like a corpse or like mold, it's very hard to get out. So like in Thailand, you would get this kind of, they would take a machete and chop up this medicinal wood. It's called gankanoon. I think it's a jackfruit tree wood. And you chop it up into chips and you boil it, and it has this kind of astringent smell. It's a very good smell. It smells very healthy. And then that's what you use to dye your robes. So the robes have this kind of medicinal smell to them. It's kind of like, they come out this beautiful, like brown-red color. It's actually, the way that a robe looks when it's like chemically dyed is one thing, but when it's naturally dyed, it has like a different look to it. Like it somehow catches the light differently. It's very beautiful, And the smell is very strong. This very nice, strong smell. But even if you do that with a robe that's kind of smelly or moldy, the smell might still remain from from a dead body. And yet the Buddha says that a person who cultivates the 4 jhanas, who thinks these 8 thoughts of a great man, when they do so, then their robe of rags will seem to them like a householder's kind of clothes chest, full of various types of, beautiful clothing, kind of a scarf, and maybe if you're a lay person, like a sweater or like a vest. It's kind of a robe made of rags. And so this is the power that the mind has. This is the potential that exists for the mind, is that a person can be happy living like a monk with nothing almost, living on scraps of food, living at the root of a tree, living with rag robes. It was very interesting, actually. There's a sutta verse where the Buddha says, this life is considered like the lowest life. Kind of, going around begging for food. You don't have any money. You're living at the root of a tree, and you wear clothes that are made of rags. And he says, but nobody forced you to do this. So, people go forth from rich families for the sake of doing this. No kings are forcing the monks to do this for the sake of punishment. And people do this because the way to find a true happiness is not by looking for external things. It's by looking inside, by trying to cultivate a person's mind, by trying to make their mind at ease. And it's in this way, when the interest that a person has compounds in the Dhamma, then they start to be able to do good things with it. Same way a person kind of, let me invest in grade 12, grade 11 math, slogging, math. It wasn't terrible doing math. Math is all right. But, not seeing much from that after like 3-4 months effort. But if a person continues on with that, when they buy their first car, when they receive their first paycheck, when they buy their first house, then they don't regret whatever type of things they had to go through to get that. Actually, they look back at it and think, whoa, it was really good that I invested that way. It was excellent that I did that. So I remember one of my friends, when he became an accountant after we were in university, and we were, he was making like $15 an hour or something like that, or 14, which is still pretty good at that time, like the minimum wage at that time might have been like 10. But then in his 20s, when he got his first accounting job, he started making like, $50,000 or something like that a year, which, again, if you're an adult, it's like, okay, that's okay, but but when you're a young man, it was like, whoa, he didn't know how to spend the money. He was getting like, $1,000 every week, or he had so much money, he had no clue what to do with it. I think he traveled all over the world for a while, and now he makes even more money, but so he was kind of very happy with that. And so, definitely at that time, he was not looking back on his university life, on his high school life, and being like, geez, I could have spent that better. I could have partied. And in the same way, when a person has this taste of the Dhamma, when they experience the Dhamma, whatever types of difficulties they had to go through at the time when they taste it, at the time they experience it, seems like nothing at all. Seems very light. And in fact, they're happy that they went through them. And they would recommend that other people go through them for the sake of gaining their own benefit. And it's because these kind of things, the way that these things work, all come from the mind. All come from the actions that a person takes. If a person takes these wholesome actions, if they cultivate their mind, good things are the result. Happiness is the result. And it's for this reason that the Buddha says, when a person has these 8 thoughts of a great man, when they cultivate the jhanas, whatever they do feels divine. But this too, as good as it sounds, is just a stopping point for the meditator on the way to try to find something better. Because whatever it is, if a person's sitting there with broken wrists, staring at a TV, feeling at ease because they're high, it still has craving as its root. And it's this very craving that's insidious, because it's what leads a person to grab onto things that are pleasant, but it's craving itself. It's running after these things itself that leads them to diminish. So for this reason, even the jhanas, even feeling at ease, even feeling peaceful, when one is alone, when one is walking, when one is sitting, when one is standing, is not something that a person rests content with, is not something that a person thinks they've had enough. A person who has these things, a person who cultivates the Buddhist path, turns their mind even further, turns their mind to try to find the cessation of this very craving. So the other day I was kind of walking around and met up with this guy, and he's like, what's Buddhism? He's like, I'm a Catholic, what's Buddhism? We're kind of just walking down the street. He's like, I've seen you a lot of times, what's this kind of robe? And I was like, I'm a Buddhist monk, what's Buddhism teach? And I said, okay, well, it's probably similar to, all the other religions. It teaches, do good, don't do bad, and, good things will happen. He says, well, do you go to heaven? I was like, yeah, you can go to heaven. And I was like, but, the Buddhist goal is nibbana, to try to escape from all that. And he says, well, I don't like that. It's like, what is that? That sounds terrible. You don't have anything, you're not in heaven, you're not seeing anything or whatever, it's just blank. And I was like, well, the Buddha calls it the highest happiness. Says that's the highest happiness that you can get. And in the same way that a person who loves Demerol and Gravol, is addicted to it, wants that feeling wherever they go, can't imagine what lies beyond that feeling. In the same way, so long as a person has craving, they can't imagine what lies beyond the things that they attach to, the things that they love. But if a person goes further, if a person doesn't stop there, if a person turns their mind to this craving, if a person turns their mind to this passion, then they can find what lies beyond. They can find what lies beyond these defilements. And for a person who achieves this, there's nothing they would trade for it at all. Nothing, except something better. except more, more elimination of defilements. And so it's for this reason that the Buddha says better than kingship over the entire world is the entry into the stream. The entry into the stream of the Dhamma. The stream of the Dhamma here means the permanent elimination of a person's first three fetters. Means the achievement of stream entry. Means the person who knows that within 7 lifetimes there will be nothing more to come of this. This is what's possible for a person to achieve who doesn't quit on their path of training. Who, when craving pulls, they pull back. Who, when they're going through their practice, when they're trying to suss out where that craving is kind of very slippery, they grab onto it and they find it's pulling on something they love. Then they know that in order to get something better, I've got to let go of this thing that I love. This is a kind of interesting thing. A lot of the times the delusion that comes up when a person pulls on something they love is, I'm losing this, I'm never going to have anything like that. But again, it turns out to be something that it can turn out to be something that a person didn't expect, couldn't plan for. It's like a person going through, practicing the Dhamma, cannot plan for what they're going to have to get, what they're going to have to gain going through that. Not going to be able to plan, okay, I'm going to need grade 11 math, I'm going to need OAC math, and only then will I be able to go to university. But whatever it pulls on, they let go of. Wherever it is, whatever the challenge is, they try to rise to that challenge, try to rise to the occasion. Because the happiness that comes for a person who goes beyond the defilements is just that, something that a person couldn't imagine. It's different. That those kind of achievements that the Ajahns teach, when you listen to them, are different than the usual achievements. Different than Demerol and gravel. Different than the jhanas. Different than the happiness that comes because it's a nice sunny day. It's the happiness that comes from knowing that your defilements are permanently gone. And this is the type of thing that a person who achieves it would not trade for. Even kingship over the entire world is poor compared to the noble achievements. And this is why there's a kind of sutta where the Buddha picks up this kind of very small amount of dirt in his fingernail. And he says, Bhikkhus, what do you think is more, the amount of dirt in my fingernail or the amount of dirt on the great earth? And the Buddha says, or the bhikkhus say, well, the amount of dirt on your fingernail is far less. The amount of the great earth is far more. And the Buddha says, in the same way, the amount of suffering that a person has eliminated, who's entered the stream, who has achieved the noble attainments, is far less. What they have less is far less. You basically can't even compare it, like a whole mound of the great earth to the amount that's left on a fingertip. And this is what's possible to achieve with the Buddha's teachings. These are the kind of more advanced teachings. They're never hidden, everybody knows about them. But for a person who strives in them, for a person who practices them, then their path of practice might be different than what they thought it was in the text. Their moving forward, their experience of the jhanas might be different than what they thought it was in the text. And their achievement, what's required, what they need to achieve stream entry, is different than what they read in the text, what they thought it might be. But all of these things surpass. They surpass not in the sense that, okay, what the Buddha said was wrong in the text, it wasn't true. Actually, what he said was true. But it's like somebody who reads about a mango. A mango is ripe, it's kind of sweet, a little bit tangy. Okay, you can imagine tartar sauce. Tartar sauce is also sweet and tangy, right? Or like ketchup, that's also sweet and tangy. Mango tastes like ketchup. But the fact of the matter is that the purpose of all this, of looking for a mango, is to alleviate one's hunger. When a person bites into a mango, when they taste it for themselves, when they alleviate their hunger, they've used that knowledge for its true purpose. They've used the Buddha's teachings to taste those teachings themselves, to know those teachings themselves. And so for this reason, all of us who've come here today, all of us who've meditated before, we're actually here with a kind of profound purpose in mind. We're here doing something very, very important. We're here with a goal that's very great, a goal whose achievement means more. More than houses, more than cars, more than children, more than family. Not to say that these things are terrible, more than anything at all. Because all of this stems from the mind. For a person who eliminates defilements from their mind, a little bit, they get a little bit of ease. For a person who eliminates defilements from their mind a middle amount, they get a middle amount of ease. For a person who completely eliminates defilements from their mind, they get complete ease. There's nothing that can change that ease into dis-ease. There's nothing that can change that victory into defeat. And it's for this purpose that we come together to meditate. Okay? So with that in mind, maybe you can try a little bit of meditation.